Now the public can attend.
So are we on? We're good to go?
We are on. Let me see.
Right.
Hang on, Maris, are we admitting people still to the meeting?
I do not have, let's see. I have 2 attendees online so far,
Michelle is Michelle one of them?
Michelle and Liz.
Oh, actually, it should also be Patricia and John Anthony. Can I start the meeting? I like to
Yes.
start-
I believe so.
Yes.
We just want to do a call to order and get started.
Yeah. This 17 July 2024 Santa Monica Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency meeting is called to order. At this time, I would like to ask all citizens to rise if you are able to join me in the pledge of allegiance. Okay, I'll run like that. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, Sunny. Okay. Thank you. Good morning. I am Nicole. I am chair of the State Santa Monica Basin GSA for this year. At this time, I would like to ask Ms. Speaker to conduct the roll call and determination of whether we have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Chair Natoli. Director Welch,
Here.
Director Singletary,
Here.
Director Gonzalez, Director Nguyen,
Present.
perfect. Director Wang,
Sorry, I think,
Sorry, was that Wang? Sorry.
Oh.
apologies.
Actually, that present was for Wang.
I'm sorry. Okay, perfect. So Nguyen is not here, Gonzalez is not here, but Wang is here.
You said Gonzalez will be.
Yeah, they'll be here at like 8:15.
Okay, Gonzalez will be here at 8:15.
Correct.
Perfect, thank you. And then Chair Natoli.
Here.
Great, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. Do any of the directors have ex parte communications to disclose? Neither do I. Seeing none, I'd like to read the rules of conduct for our meeting today. The board will only entertain comments that are civil. Anyone who becomes disruptive, disrespectful, repetitive, does not remain on topic, or impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting will be asked to sit down and given a warning by the chair of the board, or if attending virtually, will be muted. The individual will be asked to leave by the chair of the board if they continue with disruptive conduct per Government Code Section 54957.95. No warning is required if the individual is using force or threatening to use force against someone. Moving on to item 5, consent items is approval of the minutes. First, do board members have any comments on the draft minutes? Right, I just have a couple of very minor editorial comments. Item 8A, the first paragraph and the third paragraph, there's a couple of extra words at the end. There's an extra increased and an extra made that can be deleted.
I'm sure I did have a comment.
Yes, please. Dr. Welch.
On item 9A, I just wanted to clarify that Beverly Hills leadership during that time was giving direction of cost share based on land area for both administrative or call for administrative, legal, and CIP. Just wanted that clarification.
Is that change understood? Dr. Weinberg.
Yes, I'm sorry, would you mind repeating that just a little bit louder for the recording?
The direction at that time during this meeting was that Beverly Hills was supporting a land area-based cost share that included administrative, legal, and CIP.
we can add that to the minutes.
Thank
Right.
you.
That's what we, that same item, 9A, it looks like Beverly Hills is spelled incorrectly.
Oh, yes, there's an extra E in Beverly.
That,
Thank you. Good find. I've never heard of the Beverly. And any other changes or comments on the draft minutes? Can I get a motion to accept them as modified?
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes as modified.
My second?
Any discussion? Any opposed?
We vote about having, unanimous,
It's true, you can't.
five of us.
Oh,
Well,
you have to have.
this is the forum.
Okay.
These are the forum is the number in attendance, yes?
Normally, yes, but in order to have an action item approved, you need unanimous consent of all members. This is what you guys
Oh, right.
agreed to in the bylaws.
Forums on this, just like the meeting.
Well,
That-
maybe-
They're probably-
All right, let's hold this item
Yeah.
until.
8:15.
Director Gonzalez comes. Right, very good. It's time for the public forum. This is the public comment period. This is the chance for individuals to speak on items which are not on the agenda, but which are in the purview of the GSA. Ms. Suppiger, do we have anyone signed up for public comment period?
We had two individuals submit speaker cards, John Davis and Patricia McPherson, and neither is in attendance online. I'm not sure if they're in the room. But looks like,
They're not physically.
okay.
Did they register for the Zoom meeting?
I'm not sure if they registered. I can check if they registered with our IT, but, no, they're not in attendance.
Okay.
I only see Liz and Michelle. Oh, John Davis actually just joined. So I will, welcome Mr. Davis. I will unmute you and you have 3 minutes to speak. You are now unmuted. Please begin. Your time starts now.
Mr. Davis, this is a public comment period. Please go ahead.
Mr. Davis, we can't hear you in the room right now.
Are you on mute?
He is not on mute. I hear background noise coming through, which means he's unmuted, but I'm not sure that he can hear us. Let me chat him. Just let him know I've unmuted him. Mr. Davis, can you hear us?
We hear typing now.
Mr.
Yeah.
Davis, is that you?
No, you're probably hearing mine. This is Patricia McPherson.
Could you mute yourself, Ms. McPherson, unless you're called to speak?
Say again?
Could you mute yourself unless you are called upon to speak?
I was asked to unmute, so
Are you,
I thought
I
you-
believe she's in the room with Mr. Davis. I only unmuted Mr. Davis. So they must be on the same line. Let me,
that's possible. I used his entry into this rather than
Okay.
search my email to find whatever was sent a month ago.
I see. Okay, so that's why I'm seeing Mr. Davis as the attendee. Great. Okay, well, if Mr. Davis is not here, I will give you 3 minutes to submit public comment. Your time starts now.
All right, this is Patricia McPherson, Grassroots Coalition. I just want to pick up where we've left off with regard to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and the fact that Baiona is acknowledged by the Department of Water Resources as a groundwater dependent ecosystem. They provided corrections and recommendations to this group. And as of the last meeting, as a recap, and let me know if anything has changed, that it was decided that you would help to retrieve information with regard to the freshwater resources of the Baiona area that have not been evaluated. And that's again, according to the Department of Water Resources, that need to be done. I will let you know that we have been working with the Water Board in working to retrieve this information and to find out what volume meters are working, what aren't, working. We have issues with the Department of Sanitation with regard to retrieving full information from them on the dewatering that's ongoing for the gas mitigation systems. They have to keep the groundwater 1 foot below the gas intake systems. There are 45 industrial wastewater permits that we are looking into, including the Water Board's assistance in garnering this information. And what we'd also like to know is recently the water has been distributed out across Baiona wetlands, again, south of Jefferson Boulevard. We have not heard from CDFW or the Baiona Conservancy as to their allowing for this water to overflow from the freshwater marsh into Baiona. We know that there is no land management plan that was ever done by CDFW. That's been acknowledged by the director, Bonham. And so we are looking on how to manage all the voluminous fresh water that is available for Baiona to be self-sustaining out there with that water. And if any of you know, for instance, how that water is, any discussions regarding putting that water out there, this is an unusual circumstance. Typically, they have been sending the water simply out to sea, wasting it. And we have been working to try and stop that wastefulness and to have it managed properly so that it can be utilized. There was one NPDES permit that Playa Vista asked to have sent to sanitation, which we stepped in and asked that the water be retained for Baiona. The Water Board agreed.
Ms. McPherson, that was 3 minutes. Thank
Okay.
you very much for your comment.
Sure.
Thank you. Ms. Subir, is there anyone else signed up for public comment?
Besides John Davis, no. And he is not in attendance, it appears.
Very well, thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7 are informational items. First, 7A, Baiona Creek Wetlands final EIR. We had asked for information on which data from that CDFW FEIR was used in our GSP. Dr. Weinberg.
Thank you, Chair Natoli. Yes, so this item was requested by the board as an informational update to the board, and it was requested at the last meeting. The background for this item is that the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, the GSP for the Santa Monica Subbasin, and I apologize, you're probably going to hear me switch back and forth between basin and subbasin. I will try to stick to subbasin for this discussion. But the Groundwater Sustainability Plan for the Santa Monica Subbasin has to cover the entirety of the subbasin. That's written into the regulations of SGMA. So in order to develop a plan that addresses the entire subbasin, we need to have information about the entire subbasin, as much as we can gather. And as part of the regulations and as part of the requirements that go into the GSP, the GSA is required to develop a hydrogeologic conceptual model. Now, this is separate from the numerical model, and you've heard Interra in the past, and they use the model developed by the USGS. That's a numerical model that's actually calculating increments of groundwater flow throughout the subbasin. This is the conceptual model. So this is the understanding that is developed of why groundwater would flow in a given direction. So it's looking at what are certain sources, what are all of the sources of groundwater to the subbasin? What are the sinks? So where does the groundwater leave the basin? Through wells, through the subsurface into other adjacent basins. It looks at the subsurface controls on that movement. So it looks at the geology in the subsurface, where, what layers are conducive to groundwater flow, what layers limit or inhibit groundwater flow. And we develop this conceptual model so that we can then, in fact, use that understanding to get to the numerical model. This is the building block for the numerical modeling. So as part of the GSP development, we reviewed all of the best available data and information at the time that the GSP was prepared. And that again is the standard, that's the language in Sigma, best available science. And for this area of the subbasin, the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve, a great amount of data was collected as part of the development of the environmental impact report. So DUDEC reviewed the environmental impact report, and particularly we focused on the technical appendices to that report, where there is a lot of data about the area. And so what I'm going to show you, what's on the screen right here, is the areas in the GSP where the EIR was referenced and cited. So DWR and the reader needs to understand, first and foremost, that there is a project in the works for that area of the subbasin. So there's a description, very general, not in any detail. There's a description that there is a project going on, and the project description was taken from the EIR. Secondly, in looking at the technical data, the GSP cites the appendices that list the special status plants and wildlife species, which is another component that is required in the GSP. So we cite those data that were gathered in review for this project. The GSP cites the groundwater levels that were measured at the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve and are in the appendices of the EIR. And the GSP cites some of the subsurface architecture. So where we have coarser grain materials and finer grain materials, and that controls where water is flowing and where water is not available to flow. So we cite in particular the thickness of the Ballona aquitard. That's a subsurface layer with finer grain materials that does not allow water to flow through it easily. Additionally, aside from the technical background, the EIR is cited in a couple other places in the GSP, and it's cited in reference to some of the historical work that was done in the area, dredging of the area. And that's relevant to the GSP because this all happened prior to 2015, and so it's establishing for DWR the existing conditions within the basin. It also references CDFW's management and ownership of that portion of the subbasin, and it references the areas. This is a very technical point, but one thing we had to go through in the GSP is talk about which areas are served by which water agencies, and so it references the areas within the ecological reserve that are served water from LADWP. So these are the citations of the EIR in the GSP. And what's important to keep in mind in this is that the sustainable management criteria, the criteria by which the GSA is obligated to manage this basin, are not based on anything in the environmental impact report. So when it comes to implementing this approved GSP, there's no impact from decertification of the EIR on those sustainable management criteria and your ability to implement the GSP as you submitted it to DWR.
Hey, Jill, Dr.
Yes.
Weinberger, the PowerPoint presentation is not showing to the webinar participants. It's
Uh-oh.
small on the screen. I think we're seeing, the room is big.
I don't know that
And-
I have any control over that from my
Okay.
end. Which are you seeing? Are you seeing the multi-screen PowerPoint or the single screen PowerPoint?
Single screen.
Okay,
Let
can
me try.
you
Here, let me see.
maybe,
Presenter view, sometimes you can switch it.
Let me try one thing. So-
yeah, I apologize for that. The Miss
I can
Supergirl.
always, yes, I can always share screen if
Okay,
you have
yeah,
a
we might-
problem.
Email those two, the pages too.
yeah, and I apologize that it's not showing well on the Zoom meeting. It's, these are in the board packet
Oh, in the
as
board.
well. So yeah, I think if you've taken over, that would be great. So we're on the, we're on the third slide of item 7A.
Thank you.
Oh, this one.
There we go.
Yep.
Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. Apologies for the technical issues. So the focus here really is that there's an approved GSP. The management criteria that are in that GSP are not reliant on anything that was decertified in the EIR. And so this agency is able to go ahead and implement the approved GSP as it was submitted to DWR at this time. There is a periodic evaluation that's required of every GSA, every GSP, and that will be due in 2027. So at that time, we can review any updates that have happened to the project and incorporate those into that periodic evaluation document to keep DWR informed of what's going on with the project and with that part of the subbasin.
Can you repeat that year?
It's January of 2027. It's 5 years after the minimum, sorry, the maximum time you're allowed to wait until you submit an evaluation is 5 years. So the GSP was submitted in 2022. The first periodic evaluation has to be into DWR no later than 2027, 5 years from the date that you submit it.
Very well, thank you, Dr. Weinberg. Do members of the board have any comments or questions on this item? Director Wang.
Dr. Weinberg, can you, comment on we haven't received any direct communication with DWR regarding our GSP as a result of this, right? At least I don't recall seeing any direct communication to the GSA after whatever portions of the EIR was decertified. I don't recall seeing.
Yes, if the question is, have I received or have I seen any communication from DWR regarding concerns about the decertification of the FEIR or its impact on implementing the GSP? I have not.
Also, I should note that Dr. Gonzalez has joined us. We are back to the full form. Dr. Gold, you have a question?
No, I was in the same, but you said it, it's just we have full form. I don't know if Marcy was able to see.
Right, any other comments or questions? I just noted that it also appears to me that these references are not germane essential for our GSP's conclusions, and I didn't see a fatal flaw in any of these references, so I'm satisfied that we're in good shape. And we won't need to do any backtracking with our GSP, or at least not in relation to the biowetlands area. Do we have members of the public signed up to speak on this item, Ms. Supiger?
We do. We received 2 speaker cards, one from John Davis and one from Patricia McPherson. I will unmute Mr. Davis first. And you will have 3 minutes to speak starting now. Mr. Davis, you should be able to speak now.
Yes, I'd like to do a check. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, first of all, in accordance with item 7A, this organization asserts its legal authority to create and implement a GSP. However, this organization has also admitted that it is not a legal entity. Therefore, it's incapable of creating or implementing a GSP as we're discussing in item 7A. Let me read you the item that was uploaded by Sunny Wang, basically an employee of the city of Santa Monica for this agency. And when he uploaded this to the Water Board's website, it was done with the assumption of regularity. That is, the agency assumed that Mr. Wang would be uploading something in accordance with the law, but he did not. Here is what the purpose of the MOU that was uploaded says. It says, this MOU is not intended to form a new legal entity.
Mr. Davis, you're commenting on item 7A and.
I just commented on 7A and you're clock watching my testimony, which is illegal. And I am speaking to the governance as it relates to item 7A. And I really don't appreciate you over speaking me and taking my time away. I'm speaking to the governance in regard to item 7A. Is that clear?
I've got that on the record, and so this is the one time only that you will be making those comments. Please proceed.
Ma'am, you have no authority to make that statement. And I am very sad that you've taken my time away. I would like my time back on this item. Can you acknowledge you will give me my time back, please? I'm entitled to 3 minutes.
You're entitled to up to 3 minutes, Mr. Davis.
Yes, but that doesn't include your interruption and clock watching of my testimony. So please let me finish my testimony and please disregard the time that you took from my testimony and allow me to speak on the item 7A, which I'm speaking on. Again, you have interrupted my train of thought and my testimony, which is illegal. It's clock watching. This organization is admittedly not a legal entity and therefore incapable of creating a GSP and implementing it as you're discussing in item 7A. The MOU is not intended to form a new legal entity. Therefore, this is not a legal entity and you're incapable of implementing a GSP. And this is the heart of the problem. Now, if you were capable of implementing a GSP, there would be a lot of problems with what you're talking about right now. For instance, absolutely disregarding all of the data that was created for the sustainability or the Groundwater Sustainability Act. It's absent all of that data. The contractor you're using is cherry picking data and trying to create an artificial situation to present to the public without using the data that was created by the state for this very purpose.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. That was 3 minutes. So I'm going to mute you and move to our next speaker. Patricia McPherson, I will unmute you now and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, this is Patricia McPherson. You can hear me, yes?
Yes. we can hear
Hi,
you.
Ms. Dudek is inaccurate in as much as she stated that the certified FEIR was not used for comments made on the report that was sent into the DWR. There were many comments made regarding the FEIR that had to do with habitat and the habitat conditions that exist out there that is all now decertified. So number one, there are inaccuracies in what you were just told regarding that. So there is impact from a decertified EIR. Furthermore, there is a great deal of data. She seemed to start off with this hydrogeologic model that is required. the CDFW never performed a land management plan, which would have included a groundwater sustainability evaluation of this area. It was never done. CDFW has acknowledged that. There is no information with regard to the hydrology of Baiona itself in the EIR, which is why all of this needs to be done and has not been done, which is also why the DWR said you need to make these corrections. You need to do the surface and groundwater interface. Right now, we are engaged with the water board, as I said, in retrieving this information to determine what are the volumes of water that are being diverted away from Baiona. We have shown you images that a good deal of information of volumes of water that we did provide to DUDEC early on that were never included in her evaluation whatsoever. All of this still needs to be done. Ms. Natoli, when you talk about not having to do any backtracking, of course, there's a great deal of backtracking that needs to be done, even according to the DWR. So, and now according to the water board, which is what we've been working cooperatively with them in doing. So, what you are saying makes no sense whatsoever with regard to no need for backtracking necessary on this. It would be great to have your help on this because it is your job, and yet it is not occurring. It's hard to begin to even start on the things that have been done inappropriately with this group, with the lower portion of the basin. We are well aware that the studies done by DUDEC were contracted to only look at the portion that the city of Santa Monica was engaged in. We now have numerous city council members and other people from all along the coast that are now asking for freshwater evaluation to be done. So
Thank you, Ms.
your lack of
McPherson. That was
concern
3 minutes.
is out of order with
That was 3
the
minutes, so
world,
I'm going to mute
frankly.
you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any of the directors, Director Wang, did you have, any comments to the public comments, any responses to public comments?
Probably just more a follow-up question for our GSA consultant. My understanding is that what the information that was presented is simply highlighting what was referenced from the EIR, not necessarily specific evaluations, right? It's taking material data to support our GSP, is that correct? Or
Not sure I fully understand your question. I will agree that the information that was presented here today are the areas in the GSP, the sections in the GSP where the EIR was cited in the GSP. So that doesn't include comments that came in on the GSP, although all of those comments were addressed in an appendix to the GSP, and all of that information was provided to DWR as part of the GSP, including all of the comments.
I guess let me clarify this. If I look at some of these items, right, these things we're citing, referencing certain sections from the EIR. To me, a lot of that is baseline information. For example, we're citing historical water levels, right? That was on the previous slide. We're citing reports on the thickness of the aquitard, disposal of dredge material. Those are just information that's taken from the EIR here, not necessarily analysis that was done in the EIR, but background information provided in the EIR.
Correct.
We're using that to build our model.
Yes, correct. Thank you for that clarification. That is right.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? All right, thank you. Unless you have anything to add, Dr. Weinberger, this was an informational item, so we are receiving and filing. Moving on to item 7B, review of the groundwater extraction ordinance. And Dr. Weinberger, are you presenting that?
I will be. And now that I don't have screen sharing, I apparently am not allowed to move.
Sorry.
So no, now in the room, we can't see. Let me see if I can do this. I'm trying to advance the slide in the room. There are many technical issues here. I'm gonna reduce. Yes, I think I need a different screen share. Let me see if we can,
That last.
there we go.
There we go.
Okay. So yeah, this item, I apologize, let me get my notes out here. This item is the well metering ordinance. And just the brief background on this is at the last board meeting, I would say 2 meetings ago, the directors requested that DUDEC provide a review of some well ordinances that are out there in the world, just to understand what the kinds of things that other basins have done to start registering and metering groundwater extractions in their basins. So we provided a general summary of some of the requirements that other basins have imposed on groundwater extractors in their basins. And then at the last board meeting, I believe the direction was then for legal counsel to get together and draft an ordinance for review by and comment by the board and the public. So DUDEC prepared just a really outline of that document with some of those requirements that we had discussed at the previous meeting for legal counsel to get together and review. And I was not part of that meeting, so I can leave it to them to add anything that they'd like to this background discussion. But the document that you have in your board packet and that we're seeing on the screen here is the result of the review by legal counsel and is presented to you for your review and thoughts today.
As this is under informational items, we will not be taking an action today, but we will be discussing the item. Are there any questions from the directors? Director Lang.
Question about, probably this is also for us to consider as the board here. The ordinance itself is very primarily focused on extraction metering, or your solid flow meter. The curious, should we also include a monitoring component, or should that be a separate component or a separate ordinance that we should adopt and implement this first, and then we'll follow up as a monitoring to support this? If you recall, the issue we got at the Hillcrest is that, you know, it's in the area of uncertainty. We need additional monitoring, just to provide the board ability to require monitoring in addition to, you know, new wells being installed down the road. Does not necessarily need to be in here, but I think it's something we should consider down the road as a separate ordinance to support this.
Well, considering that each jurisdiction will have to take this to their legislative body, we may want to put everything into one instead of taking the pinata back from another round at some point in the future. So maybe we do want to add a monitoring component to this. Is there any discussion on it? Director Gonzalez.
To build on Director Lane, first,
The audio is inaudible.
this was a very good draft of the ordinance.
Just a second, Director Gonzalez. Ms. Superdirector, could you ensure that our attendees are muted?
Yes.
I do appreciate that you need to raise the volume, but let's take care of that in the chat, Mr. Davis. Thank you.
Yeah, we cannot hear you.
Unfortunately, but to build on Director Lane, again, first draft, I was happy to see kind of the direction it's going in the ordinance itself. But section 6 makes reference to the fact that there's going to be annual reporting of the extractions. And to quote it says, needed extractions shall be reported in a sense, annually. And so again, Director, we reference that we've been customers in applications to pump in the basin. Several meetings talking about the sensitivity of the basin, the handling of additional demand. And so my question, I guess, to Dr. Weinberg would be, it's unclear what we mean by meter. Obviously, is that annual, is that monthly, is that daily? I would suspect, as someone that has some understanding of this, that the more data you have, meaning daily, will be of value to you as we assess the basin moving forward. I think it would be beneficial to us to have more finer data so that for whatever reason, as we assess the basin, there's an ability to calibrate, to assess, and to evaluate future requests. So whether it's monitoring, whether it's more specificity on the level of detail of the meter data that we expect from the pumpers, I think that would be helpful.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is that all right? Just to make sure I understand, you are raising the point of if all, and I was under the impression that section 6, and Ms. Supiker, if we could scroll to section 6, just so the public
Yes.
observes the
And sorry, it is a little challenging to hear the members speaking in the room.
okay.
Try to talk.
Well, yeah, well, I will try to project. So for section 6, I think right now, my understanding is this would require reporting twice a year. It just as every 6 months. So there's October 1st through March 31st should be reported by April 30th. And then April 1st through September 30th would be reported by October 31st. However, what I think I'm hearing the request is to specify language on the frequency of the data that's being received, right? So that groundwater extraction would be recorded daily, but only reported twice a year.
Right, so in that first line, metered extractions, we could just edit that line to say, provide monthly metered extractions or provide daily metered extractions if they exist. My point is, you compare this important information against section 5, which is information about the flow meter.
Understood.
It's trivial.
Yeah.
The manufacture of the flow meter and the specificity on that piece of equipment is less significant than the value of the data.
Understood. And then,
Dr. Weinberger,
yes,
we can hear you very loud and clearly. It's just the members on the side of the room with Chair Natoli that it's a little challenging to hear.
Oh, yeah.
It's an instruction manual.
yeah,
Press that one.
It's likely me, so I'll speak louder.
yeah, I think I am used to I got my training yelling at high school students. So sorry if I have the loudest voice in the room. And then just another clarifying question. When we're talking about monitoring, we're talking about additional monitoring for groundwater levels and potentially groundwater quality. Is that the direction? Okay, thank you.
I think maybe we just reference, I think, DWR's best practices on monitoring.
Okay.
As a requirement, I think you can use.
What are those? What are their best practices?
If I recall, I think the best practice is the install a monitoring well.
Yeah.
As opposed to taking water levels within the production.
Right, and the practices tell you how often to take the reading?
That I think.
Because that may sound like.
Yeah, we also have to define that. So I guess I would ask our GSA consultant to do the same to come back with a recommendation to recommend a frequency on that data to be collected as well for both the extraction monitoring flow meter as well as the monitoring water level monitoring reporting frequencies.
Would it be acceptable if that recommendation is just incorporated into the revised language rather than a separate recommendation? Okay, thank you.
Just one more separate topic. But curious, I know this is still in development, the ordinance itself. So what if a pumper does not comply? What's the penalty? And then analogous to that, are there fees associated with the reporting? And if so, if there are fees, obviously that would likely generate a whole list of questions, how are they gonna be collected, administered, who's gonna oversee that pocket of funds, et cetera.
I am gonna step back and let legal counsel start to weigh in on that since we're rapidly getting out of my area of expertise.
Susan Cola, I advise the city of Santa Monica as a member, as a GSA member. It's an excellent question, and I do think that the attorneys are gonna have to give that more thought. Theoretically, each agency has their own municipal ordinance, and each agency already has some sort of enforcement section that generally applies to the ordinance, but how to implement that, I think has to be given some thought, and also there's going to be due process that has to be provided, if somebody is penalized. So I do think it requires more thought, and, if the direction from the GSA is to have the attorneys go back and make some recommendations on that, we're happy to do that. I'm happy to do that.
But the enforcement itself is still be dependent on each agency, right? Each agency.
It is, however, there may be a mechanism, and again, this is something that the attorneys could discuss where, you know, there is some delegation of authority, if it's allowed within the agency to have, let's say, an investigation performed by members of the, well, depends on which members, but again, this is something that has to be fleshed out because each agency only has authority over their jurisdiction. In theory, it would be that agency's code enforcement personnel, for example, or if it's, code enforcement doesn't handle it because they don't typically know anything about metering, at least, not in Santa Monica. So you may need somebody with specialized knowledge to do that, and again, it's a question that has to be explored, and I think the attorneys can explore that individually with their member representatives.
Which begs the question, how do we determine fees? And who imposes and collects the fees?
Right. That, and again, because we are a membership agency versus a JPA, for example, it has to be enforced through each member agency's regulatory authority.
So in this
So-
case, the GSA can only make recommendations to each member agency, is that correct?
That's one way of doing it. Mhm. The other way is perhaps each agency comes up with their own mechanism for enforcement, runs it by the GSA. GSA blesses it, and even though, you know, it's not identical, as long as the enforcement is adequate, the mechanism is there to enforce. That may be enough, but again, we have to explore that.
Now, I have a question just for background. City of Santa Monica has banned all well installations.
You need to speak up.
The City of Santa Monica has their own ordinance and banned all
Private.
private wells. And so my question, I know LA City allows wells, LA County. My question is, I wonder if Beverly Hills and Culver City, if you have any existing enforcement for private wells?
I'm not sure. I have to look it up.
I know for oil well extraction, we have restrictions. Probably I have to look into it.
Is that something we give direction to legal and to hash out when this comes back to next board meeting?
I do have also, unless there's something else.
I just had a couple minor
Sure,
comments
sure.
on the ordinance itself, on section 1. In the ordinance shall be known as metering ordinance, if we could expand that and just call it groundwater extraction metering ordinance, so it doesn't get confused with other metering like water meters for use at households, etc. Just to clarify, this is for groundwater extraction. On On section 4A, talks about the date all existing extraction facilities should be registered January 31st, 2025. I don't think that's likely, considering that we're not adopting today, and they're just saying we adopt at the next board meeting, that each member agency then need to go adopt. It's gonna probably take some time. I would recommending putting that date probably end of 2025, December 31st, 2025.
Director Wang, if I could make a recommendation, as opposed to putting a specific date in our ordinance, perhaps, because doesn't it depend on when each jurisdiction adopts their part of the ordinance? Shouldn't it be something like within 5 months or 3 months or 4 months after the effective date?
Or you could have a uniform date. In other words, you could say the ordinance takes effect on such and such date so that you're all in sync. It's another way of doing it.
Right. I think that's better because it puts a date into this ordinance and people aren't having to run around to 5 different jurisdictions to see when each one adopted the ordinance, which they won't do.
It's kind of sad to come looking for all
It
that.
is. No, that's a
fun. Oh, try.
I'm in agreement with that, with what legal counsel suggested. And then the last comment that I have is in section 5, if we could just clarify that as both for new and existing wells.
One comment, just to check to see if the mic works. Section 5, last sentence, there's a reference to GSA staff, which that does not exist, but just replacing staff with representative.
And I apologize, I don't think I fully understood the date correction at this point. I heard initially December 31st and then of 2025, and then different suggestion, and I apologize for where we landed on that.
What we're just suggesting is that the effective date be a hard date that makes sense in light of what progress we're making on the drafting,
Okay,
and
So-
then the GSA would agree to that date or not, but we could propose something.
So right now, we don't know.
so
what
right now we will leave a blank.
Yeah.
And, okay, understood. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
All right, I have some questions. Under section 3 definitions for de minimis, or it said means a person who extracts for domestic purposes 2 acre-feet. Actually, or less, not of less, it should be or less, per year as defined in Sigma. I don't know what we're saying is defined. Does this refer to the Sigma definition of domestic or acre-feet?
I believe it's de minimis. We can look that up, but I believe it's de minimis.
Okay, as de minimis is defined?
Yeah.
Okay. Clarification. Also in definitions under extraction facility. It means any device or method, and I'll get a little silly here. So this seems really broad and undefined, so what I don't know is the pump and extraction facility. Is the drill bit used to dig the well an extraction facility? Is a sluice to gather the water coming up from a spring an extraction facility? If I have a bucket to gather the spring water that fills a depression, is the bucket a facility? And if I'm carrying water, is that the method? So maybe this is a rabbit hole, but any device or method for the extraction of groundwater, if there's a specific, what does that mean? I think we need more clarification.
We can go back and clarify that. The intent was not to specify too much so as to exclude potential extractors, but we can shrink the the breadth of this to do that.
Right, even if it's, this does not mean, if it's easier to say what it doesn't mean as opposed to what it does. You know,
If I may, this is Susan Cola speaking again. It occurred to me that one thing the attorneys could explore is the possibility of the GSA adopting guidelines for this as implementation, and then in the ordinance, it would reference the guidelines that are approved by the GSA. And then we can get into more detail in the guidelines. Something to explore.
I like that idea. That would be very helpful. And in section 4, where we talk about the location, address, parcel number, well number of the facility, would GPS coordinates be helpful, especially if it's a large property or they have several wells on the property? It seems to me GPS coordinates might be helpful. And those are easy to get these days. Section 4B. Numeral 7. The primary use that what we would want to know is the primary uses of the extraction facility. Don't we want to know what the primary uses of the extracted water are? Because the primary use of the extraction facility should be extracted water, I would say. But don't we want to know what the water is being used for? And then also in that same number 7, it says primary uses of extraction facility, municipal, et cetera. And this is just for my clarification, does this also mean that Santa Monica or City of Santa Monica or LADWP or Beverly Hills or Culver City, they also need to meter a new facility? For the county, we'd all need to meter, which makes sense. And then also under section 5, again, the following criteria and information we're asking for, again, wouldn't we like GPS coordinates? I don't know if that's different. Under section 4, it would be helpful to have GPS coordinates in those places. Under section 7, enforcement and penalties. It says shall be subject to the criminal and civil sanctions set forth in SIGMA, including Water Code section 10.732. I don't know what those are. What are those? How do they help us? How do they hinder us? Where are they lacking in our opinion or for our needs? I don't like referencing something when I don't know what it is. Those were my comments. Also, there's a extra space in the title where it says Santa Monica. It says San A Monica. I guess spell check thought San was a word.
Which section are you talking about?
The title.
Oh.
An ordinance of the.
Oh, yes.
Do we have any other comments?
I have a couple, I guess, general questions. For my information, if somebody wants to get a well permit within the county, anywhere, even within an integrated city, that goes through LA County initially, correct?
The
drill wells, that
The
gas.
drill
Yes.
well, so the county issues
Yes.
those permits,
Yeah.
the municipality doesn't. So this ordinance now is putting the enforcement of the wells on the individual agencies, right? So I guess, my question is if one of the agents, this is theoretical, one of the agencies were to, leave the GSA, how is the enforcement of that agency delegated to address within? And were there questions or were there conversations about possibly delegating this to county environmental since they're issued
So,
If I could just add,
Yeah.
that's what I know, and so the county only issues a
Yeah.
permit to drill the well.
right,
They don't permit equipping. Equipping the well, then that becomes DPW to come and inspect and their jurisdiction on what they decide, you know, they have to go through their process to equip and bring that well online. I mean, for the municipality.
DPW, but we
DPW. Right, so that's why the metering is kind of floating out there, because county does not permit they have no involvement in the equipment. They're only about drilling the hole and basing, that's it. I would imagine if yeah, it might defer to the county, I think, to enforce if, say, an agency potentially fill out, because you guys are. But I just, my initial thought, I don't know if that's.
That's my understanding as well, that if there is no GSA, the county would have to. take
So
over.
hypothetically, if we all pulled out, everything would default to the county.
Yeah.
Ultimately, but Basin.
Talking about gardens.
Sorry,
But,
Dr. Library, you're gonna.
Yeah.
chime in.
I think one nuance, so yeah, I agree with the distinction between the LA County issues a permit to drill the well and they inspect the well to make sure it is constructed to the specifications that they have, and that's my understanding is that's where their jurisdiction ends, and once the well has been constructed and the permit has verified that, then the county is okay with it. And the GSA is the one then under Sigma that has the authority to request metering of groundwater extractions, right? So that's a separate process from the permitting process. I would ask, I would need to go back and review Sigma some more, and I suspect others in the room might as well, to understand what would happen within a GSA that has asserted jurisdiction over the entire basin if one member agency pulls out. So I don't know that we fully understand that yet.
Right.
Sorry.
I was gonna say I mean, my recollection of the formation of the GSA is if no GSA is formed, then the county has jurisdiction. So then the question would be, if one of the agencies were to pull out, then I believe in DWR's, or Department of Water, their view, then the GSA has disbanded and therefore you would have to reform with the smaller member agencies, and then only those overlying the basin would have jurisdiction over that, and then what's left would possibly be subject to county jurisdiction. So we could look into that if that's the direction that you want us to look into, come back.
Does that need to be spelled out in this ordinance, for example, say they invent a member agency, or is it just we just need to understand it, before we finalize it, I don't think it needs to be spelled out how that would be handled.
So if, just because I've not dealt with, well, issuance, just asking questions, verification, so, the equipping of the permit would be the jurisdiction would issue those permits. Once, counties issue the permit for the drilling and the GSA's given concurrence on, that it's in compliance with the GSP, then it's within the agency's, jurisdiction to actually issue a permit to equip the well.
Actually don't issue a permit.
Yeah.
There's, to my understanding, I don't think there is a permit to equip. It's just, you have to meet certain conditions that it has, it's like, well, it's, you know, contamination and stuff, best practices. There is no additional permit.
And that's specific to a public well as opposed to a private agricultural well.
If the permit,
The drilling permit is, and the GSA concurrence of that sort of, the key, and being able to, for that well to exist.
Yes.
So the enforcement of the ordinance, even if the agency did not want this well to be within their jurisdiction, this would still tie the agency to enforce open monitoring and metering, et cetera. That was all my comment.
Anything to add, Mr. Weinberger?
Not before public comment.
All right, then let's go to public comment. Do we have anyone signed up to speak on this item in super?
We do. On 7B, we have John Davis and Patricia McPherson. I will unmute John Davis first. And you will have 3 minutes to speak. You may begin.
Yes, is this public comments?
Yes. It's your turn to speak on this agenda item. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, first of all, there is no legal counsel appointed to what is not a legal entity. So Susan Cola is not representing this organization as she is purporting to do.
She has not supported that. She has said she speaks for the city.
Wait, this is my testimony and someone is speaking over me yet again, which is clock watching and interfering with my testimony and disallowing me from reading my testimony. Please start my 3 minutes and allow me to read through my public comments uninterrupted. Please do so.
Do not, Ms. Supergird, continue.
Well, thank you for the approval. The parties admit and the MOU provided to the state this GSA was not intended to form a new legal entity.
Mr. Davis, you are being repetitive.
Man, you're violating the law. You can cut me off as much as you want, but it is you that are violating the law. And you're violating the Brown Act, and you're disallowing a citizen from participating in what you're calling a public agency. Again,
Will you please mute Mr. Davis? Thank you. Rules of conduct. The board will only entertain comments that are civil. Anyone who becomes disruptive, disrespectful, repetitive will be asked to sit down and given a warning, or if attending virtually, will be muted. These rules of conduct were read at the beginning of the meeting. Mr. Davis, we understand. We understand. We understand. We understand. You believe that the GSA is improperly formed. The state disagrees with you. Council for all member jurisdictions disagree with you. If you insist on starting every comment with "you were not lawfully formed," I will just mute you because you are being repetitive. We understand you don't think we were lawfully created. If you have valid comments for the item that we are discussing, please give us those comments. We do not need to hear every time that you think in opposition to what the state of California has said, that we were not lawfully created. Now I'm going to ask Ms. Superger to unmute you so you can continue in a moment. I am not extending your time. If you have comments on item 7B related to the ordinance itself, please give us those now. If not, I will again ask Ms. Superger to mute you, as I said at the beginning of the meeting. Ms. Superger, please unmute Mr. Davis.
Thank you, Chair Natoli. Mr. Davis, you've been given permission to speak. Your time starts now.
for the permission, it came from a private organization, not from the government, I must say. So then I asked if this was public comments. It was affirmed that it was. Now I'm informed it's not public comments. So I will read the comments I have prepared for this item. Again, I can repeat things as many times as I want during my testimony. There is no prohibition in the Brown Act to do so. The person that keeps trying to regulate my speech is a private organization, a private corporation that has no authority to do this in a meeting. You should not let this private organization participate in the running the meeting. It's illegal. So then, my question is, under what legal authority can you do this? And you keep saying I cannot speak to this again, but I can. I'm a member of the public. This organization has stated that it is not a legal entity. If it is not a legal entity, it must be an illegal entity, which renders it incapable.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davis. We understand your comments are we are an illegal entity. Ms. Supiger, is there another individual signed up to speak on this item?
We do have another individual, Patricia McPherson. I will allow you to speak. And your time starts now. Ms. McPherson, you are unmuted.
Ms.
am-
Stubiger, we're still not hearing Ms. McPherson in the room.
Yeah, I'm not hearing her either. She's unmuted. She has the ability to speak. So I'm not sure why. Let me message her.
Okay, you've just unmuted me. Can you hear me?
Now we can
Yeah.
hear you.
Now we can.
Hi, thank you. Patricia McPherson, Grassroots Coalition. I would support Mr. Davis's comments in as much as I understand from Ms. Cola, it would have been better to have created a JPA. As it is, we have had to go to each and every jurisdiction in order to get answers from this body, which if it was a legal entity, we should be able to go to one entity in order to garner our information. With regard to this ordinance in particular, the minutia information that is being gathered for the city of Santa Monica per every drop of water, there is absolutely a contrast to that in the southern portion of this basin, that no groundwater extraction and the diversion is being accounted for by this group. That's already been cited by the DWR. We have provided data to support that. For instance, the flow meter minutia that you are requesting of the city of Santa Monica, we have no flow meter data whatsoever from the Playa Vista project that you should also be seeking. It's an enormous amount of water. Millions of jeepers, acre feet are being taken away by this the Playa Vista project and diverted out to sea or sent to sanitation, and you've retrieved no information whatsoever. If you would only even acknowledge that, it would be helpful, because we are working with agencies in order to gather all of this information. But you have no discussion of it whatsoever. It is consistently going back simply to the city of Santa Monica. And to talk about disbanding this group, we have no idea what you're even talking about with regard to this ordinance. What disbanding? This information needs to be gathered. You're talking about disbanding a group that hasn't been a legal GPA formed. You are not looking at any of the groundwater extraction. What about the saltwater intrusion that was diagnosed that said you needed a monitoring well around the Marina del Rey area? We're hearing nothing with regard to that. The decertification of the EIR, the CDFW will not be bringing in ocean seawater into this area. It is important to protect the groundwater of this area. And again, we are not seeing any support whatsoever from this group, which is in contradictory to the last meeting that you said that you would be supportive of garnering all of the information, and evidently that has just been dropped by the wayside.
Great, thank you very much. That was 3 minutes. And I have no other speaker comments. So Chair Natoli, we can proceed with the next agenda item.
Are you members of the public who are here to speak on an item?
No, they're already.
Okay. No.
They can't just in the public process.
Are there any other comments from the directors?
I guess if I just make one comment, just so the public is clear, the ordinance here isn't for the city of Santa Monica, it's for the Santa Monica Basin. So that's basin wide, and what we're trying to do is to get flow monitoring, flow extraction data from areas that we currently don't have data. So we have the ability to require flow measurements to be taken and to be reported to support advancing our GSP. So I just want to clarify that for the public. The intent of that is for us to gather more information, not just for the city of Santa Monica, but across the whole basin. Thank you.
Yes, Director Gonzalez.
We just would like to, for the record, ask that we take the recommendation from Susan about that we really quickly develop guidelines that would supplement this ordinance. Advance this ordinance language further with specific recommendations on section 7, which have to do with jurisdiction, enforcement, and how this interagency scenario would play out as far as governance and oversight. So just to keep building on what we have now.
All right. So I think hopefully we've given some direction to council and to Dr. Weinberger. Do you have any questions for us?
I do not have any more at this time. Thank you.
Right, very well. What I'd like to do is to go back to item 5, which we held consent item, the approval of the minutes. We needed to wait for Dr. Gonzalez, so we could have full membership here to take a vote. Yes.
I did have a follow-up question, is it 9B5? Yeah, I don't know if that's correct. Remembering.
On the order, the draft order?
Oh, no, I'm back on I thought we were going to the minutes.
We're back to the minutes.
Yes. So I just wanted to get an update on the status of the language regarding the option to decline the chair, vice chair position. We added to Article 6. I think it's
We are discussing that
later.
So this is just what was discussed back then.
Okay. As long as we can get an update on that.
Okay, great. So do I have a motion? There were a couple of electoral changes to the draft minutes. Do I have a motion? I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion?
And Chair Natoli, it was a little hard to hear who made the motion and who made the second, if we could just clarify that for the record.
Yes, it was Director Wang who made the motion and Director Welch who seconded.
Thank you.
If you could call a roll call vote. Oh, yeah, we need a motion. Sorry.
Second. Perfect. Great, Director Welsh,
Yes.
Director Singletary,
Yes.
Director Gonzalez,
Yes.
Director Wang,
Yes.
and Chair Natoli.
Aye.
Perfect. Minutes are approved as amended.
Well, thank you. Moving on to item 8A, approved cost sharing plan. I have a concern about this item. My concern is that the way that the item is presented in the agenda is does not include the whole scope of the matter. when you look at the materials don't just discuss GSP implementation cost sharing between the member agencies. It also discusses it's not just the administrative cost sharing between GSA member agencies as mentioned in the agenda. It's also an implementation cost sharing that would involve third parties. The litigation cost sharing is probably not so much of an issue, but since that implementation cost sharing, which involves third parties, was not listed in the agenda, I don't think we can take any action on that part of it today. I'm not sure what the counselors have to say, but we should probably not discuss it today. I would suggest that we continue that section of the item to our next meeting, but we can certainly discuss the administrative cost sharing today.
Right, I believe that continues to be discussed in administrative costs. I would leave that.
And are there any comments from the counselors? All right, with that, then let's discuss today the administrative cost sharing. Dr. Weinberger, do you have a presentation for this?
I have a very brief presentation, and I think these two slides, this one and then the following one, should just focus on the administrative cost sharing. So if I stray from that, please feel free to interrupt me. The background on this item is that it's been addressed at a number of board meetings so far, as so looking into ways that administrative costs could be divided between agencies. The two methods for dividing those costs that have been discussed most frequently, I would say, was either an equal share of the costs, so the administrative cost split 5 ways equally among each agency, versus a land area based cost division. And I think there was another option that had come up from time to time based on groundwater extraction. So at the last meeting, there was no agreement among the member agencies, and so the attorneys for Santa Monica, Beverly Hills, and the County of Los Angeles, I apologize that just turned into the county on this slide, but for the County of Los Angeles, got together to recommend a third option for administrative cost sharing. And if we could move to the next slide for that. The administrative costs recommendation for this is based on the discussion that has been had at the board meetings over the past. And it would be limited to the current understanding of administrative costs, which is through the end of the DUDEC contract period, because that's how costs are broken out to date. And so that contract ends in February of 2028. So that would be the period for this agreement. And the understanding that the attorneys are presenting through me today is that the City of Los Angeles would pay 20% of the costs, which they had discussed as being acceptable to them in the past. County of Los Angeles would also pay 20%, which had been discussed as being acceptable in the past. The City of Beverly Hills would pay 2%, and that is based on land area. So the 20% is the 5-way split. The 2% is land area. And the City of Culver City would pay 10%, again, based on land area, with the City of Santa Monica then picking up the remainder of the costs to cover the total administrative costs. And then each member agency would pay for their own legal costs of administration.
Are there any questions from the draftees? Yes, Director Welch.
I wanted to report out that we did get direction from our city council that we would be willing to follow this plan of the 2% based off the land area.
Anything from Culver City?
No, the only comment that I would make is, motion that we made today would just be that staff would be recommending to their respective governing bodies this cost breakdown, but you know, we can't actually commit our respective agencies to funding, so.
You mean you can't commit?
I can't say Culver City, no, I can't say Culver City will pay $87,000, I have to take that to council. So I would just want the motion to address that distinction.
But to take the financial obligation to the legislative body for delivery. Correct. And any other comments from the directors?
No comment, but we'll pick up whatever's left.
Sorry, Sarah.
Better than 100%.
Ms. Subiger, do we have anyone signed up to speak on this item?
Mr. Davis requested to speak. And I can unmute him now.
Yeah.
Mr. Davis, you have been unmuted and your time starts now.
This is John Davis, and the announcement that I have 3 minutes is me because I keep being interrupted, and I am within my rights to speak under the Brown Act and its provisions. So please do not interrupt my testimony yet again with the intention of destroying it. To establish a GSP, a legal agreement must be uploaded to the state portal. This step provides that a new local agency can be formed capable of complying with the laws of California. The reason this group is incapable of lawfully entering a cost-sharing agreement is because it has admitted to the people in the state that it is not a legal entity, and an MOU uploaded to the state portal by City of Santa Monica employee Sunny Wang. The MOU states the following: this MOU is not intended to form a new legal entity. This group does not possess the authority to enter into a cost-sharing plan, which is a legal contract between obligees and obligors that contain legal terms of performance. This organization is admittedly not a legal entity and is therefore incapable of entering a cost-sharing contract, because that's precisely what it is. The following questions regard this group's legal authority to enter a cost-sharing plan. Under what state of California statutes or codes could this group form a local state agency that is not a legal entity? Is this group an illegal local agency? By all appearances, it is, and you have no authority to enter any types of contracts with one another, and you certainly don't have the right to defraud the people by indicating again and again that you are a legal entity, which you are clearly not. Did the parties evade the laws that would govern a local agency? Can the members of an illegal agency lawfully avoid compliance with governing law in contradiction to their individual sworn oaths to the state? Is this group in compliance with state of California Constitution privacy provisions, the Brown Act, the Public Retention, the Public Records Act, the Record Retentions Act, and was the City of Santa Monica and any other signatories to a contract with DUDAC entitled to enter an illegal contract which allows DUDAC to collect personal names in contradiction to the Brown Act, privacy provisions, and the state of California constitutions? And how can a private company be allowed to partially run a meeting of a legitimate legal entity, which is a local agency? So
Thank you, Mr. Davis. That was 3 minutes.
Do we have any other speakers, Ms. Subiger?
Mr. Davis was the only one who submitted a speaker card.
Right, very well.
So-
Thank you.
Thank you.
And any other comments from the board? So,
Is there a motion to adopt the proposal and advance it to our respective federal bodies to seek approval?
that's what we need now is a motion to do that.
I would like to submit a motion for us to respectively, one, accept this proposal, and two, put on our respective approval process with our governing body. Official approval and then report back at the next board meeting on the status for that approval process.
Actually, sorry, I have a question. So, I was under the impression we would develop an MOU and that's what we would take to our respective boards.
We have an MOU.
An MOU for the cost share.
Do we need an MOU?
Yeah.
Just for the cost sharing?
We would need some contract.
Yeah, that's very good.
Did that go together, I guess, and you asked?
An
Yeah,
amendment?
chime in.
First amendment, second.
This is Susan Cola speaking on behalf of the city of Santa Monica. I believe this could be another subject of direction to give to the attorneys to come back with an MOU that can be executed, which reflects the proposal.
So would it be,
Well, the reason I bring it up is that I would have to go back, or other agencies would have to go to council twice to discuss it. And then again, with an actual document delineating the cost share, I would assume those agencies probably have a similar setup. So in the interest of not having to do that, it might make sense to develop the MOU. But then we would have to vote on that in September or October. Here before we can take it to our council.
I guess my follow-up question on that, what happens if one of the member agencies, respective, your governing body doesn't approve, then you gotta come back and redevelop the whole MOU again? So that's why originally we had just proposed this, kind of like Beverly Hills got direction and approval for the amounts. So when they go back, it just formalizing things, right? So I understand from Beverly Hills perspective, yeah, they probably need an MOU. But in Culver City, from my understanding, if you haven't already daylighted this subject to your leadership, I would recommend doing that, because then we'll have to do the MOU twice, let's say if Culver City doesn't agree to the 10% amount.
And just one minor point on this is we technically already started this proposal. We're 18 months into this proposal. It started last year, February. So if we spend an enormous amount of time drafting, seeking approval, going back to our boards twice for multiple months far further and delayed, we would now have to explain to your board how you're seeking authorization for funding for a proposal that's 2 years in. It would be a challenge already for LA just to even explain that. But my point is, it's fairly time sensitive. If we can move faster on the development of the MOA, so that in the next board meeting, we can advance that document, I would appreciate that.
If I could ask legal,
I have a suggestion, which is you could go once and just seek authorization to enter into an MOU, like get the authorization for the appropriation, get the authorization to enter into an MOU, which reflects the proposal, and then have the authorized signatories. Then you only have to go once. Because that is something, at least for the city of Santa Monica, we often do in order to avoid having to go back multiple times.
and just to follow up with Susan's saying, is that we would get council approval on the budget, and then we delegate authority to our city manager then to execute the agreement, because the MOUs are signed by our city manager anyway, it's not, by council with adopted by resolution, so that would be. But I did have a question, when we did the GSP, it was a 50-50 cost share between Santa Monica, LA, DWP. How was that agreement hashed out in that 50-50 split? Was there?
I believe it was not memorialized in an MOU. I mean, the risk to the other agencies is if one agency doesn't commit in the form of an agreement, then the other agencies are left holding the bag, so to speak. So it is prudent to enter into a written agreement, which is the commitment, which is should be theoretically enforceable against the agencies. So,
Actually, I'm fairly certain it was memorialized in an MOU, and then there was an amended MOU for a second tranche of money.
okay, if it was, I don't remember it, but then that was good. That would be in conformance with what we're suggesting, which is that we have a memorialized agreement.
Yeah, LADWP would have to have a memorialized agreement. It couldn't pay Santa Monica without an agreement.
Yeah, I just don't recall seeing that agreement.
So we can come back to this special board meeting. If for us, if the draft MOU is completed before 3 months. Before the next regularly scheduled GSA board meeting. We could have a special board meeting.
Right, I guess the question for the directors up here is what, our assistant city attorney is suggesting with is getting the appropriation, amount of money approved and then delegate it to the city manager or your leadership to sign. Would that be a possible resolution to this now? And then we develop the MOU, city manager, for example, our said executes.
LADWP couldn't do that. It needs an MOU or written MOU.
So just for the record, the first amendment of the 5-agency MOU secured a 50-50 cost sharing agreement with City of LA and Santa Monica for the $1.3 million contract to do that. And this was approved July of 2019. So just so that there was that first amendment to the, to select the consultant and to do a 50-50. That's how we were able to pay.
So perhaps there's another solution, which is to give direction to the attorneys to agree upon the form which memorializes the proposal that is approved today. And then you could take that, the individual members could take that along and get the appropriation authorization as well. So you don't have to see it twice because the agreement arrangement is fairly simple. It should reflect exactly what we're talking about. And I think if the attorneys are in agreement that it will remain simple, it should not be an issue. Would that work for the LADWP attorney?
I need a written agreement to take to the board. So
We're suggesting that the attorneys provide that with the direction that it simply memorializes the proposal that has been approved today. So we all know what it is. And then we would come back by the next regular meeting and hopefully the appropriation will have been approved and the MOU executed. Okay.
my preference would be if you could agree on the amount, because if for some reason, it's quite a bit of work to take something to DWP's board, and normally there's about a 2 to 3 month lead time on that. And so we'd want to make sure that's going to be the final agreement that the GSA members have agreed to it, and there won't be any changes.
Correct. This is what the amounts are written in the proposal. So the amounts would not change and we would just take those amounts and put that into a written MOU. So there's no deviation, no negotiation, no discussion. It's simply to memorialize the proposal and the exact amounts that the GSA members are approving today.
With that timeline work for Director Singletary, being the next board meeting is tentatively for October. So if they were to draft an agreement, we would have roughly 3 months to seek authorization.
Yeah, for Culver City can get something to our council relatively quickly. I think if we're gonna have a document to take that. Will be fine. I was just asked to make the distinction that I personally can't commit these funds that our council has to. So that was the only reason I wanted that. But I think that this proposal sounds like it would be most expedient.
The direction, the attorneys will hopefully meet within the next couple of weeks and get something out as soon as possible.
I'd like to make sure that, County Council Jacobson is included in all of these. She's not getting the mailing, the emails, she's not getting the packets. I'm having to forward those to her.
it's probably because Warren's email, is on there. We can update it.
Thank you. Thank you. But please make sure Council Jacobson is included in this. So that is the motion before us.
If I could,
Yes, Dr. Gold.
when I send out the board packet, I send it to each board member. I do not, send it to the attorney. Is that something?
That's just good for me to know so that I can
Okay.
forward it to her.
Okay, I can do that. I just, I don't know which attorneys are active on each item. Okay.
Understood.
Okay.
That makes sense.
So now it's, the motion would be simply for council to get together and draft an agreement and submit it to the board members so that the board members could seek authorization.
Within the next 2 weeks.
I'll second that
It's like
motion.
corralling cats.
Distributor, that's a motion by Director Gonzalez, seconded by Director Wang. Is there any further comment? All right, Ms. Super, if you could take the roll call vote, please.
Perfect. Thank you. Director Welch,
Yes.
Director Singletary,
Yes.
Director Gonzalez,
Yes.
Director Wang,
Yes.
Director Natoli, or Chair Natoli. My
Aye.
apologies.
Aye.
Great. Thank
And-
you.
And thank you. And then we are continuing the discussion on implementation cost sharing and litigation cost sharing to our next regularly scheduled board meeting. All right, item 8B, elect new vice chair. Has anybody decided to say yes?
I'll come back again. I was enjoying this out of the table.
Everyone's looking around.
So I guess, this, for my clarification, I was remote last time, so I didn't hear, it was hard to hear the conversation in the room. From the notes, it looked like, Director Singletary declined. And then it went to Director Wing, but then he was the alternate, so I think that was up to Director Gonzalez if he wants to serve as vice chair.
That's right. Director Wynn said he could not speak for Director Gonzalez, and so you're on the hot seat right now.
Very odd.
It's reading an agenda.
But,
Put your hand on.
So since Sunny is being very nice, I support Sunny being the vice chair. LA submits to be.
No, but Beverly Hills is next, they have to decline first.
Assuming Beverly Hills decline, I will step up and be the vice chair next time. Offer to work next time.
So speaking for Beverly Hills, we respectfully decline. And
I guess I'm back as vice, I'll be vice chair. That's what I get for paying half, right?
Well, this is an election, and Director Wang has been promoted.
I'll accept.
to Vice chair, he accepts the nomination. We need to take a vote. Ms. Supergirl, we need to take a vote.
Perfect. Do we need a motion in a second to nominate Director Wang as vice chair?
Well, Director Gonzalez has made the motion.
And I'll second.
It's Director Welsh.
Seconds, the motion.
Perfect. So Director Gonzalez made the motion, Director Welsh made the second. And then we will move to a roll call vote. Director Welsh,
Yes.
Director Singletary,
Yes.
Director Gonzalez,
Yes.
Director Wang,
Yes.
and Chair Natoli.
Yes, ma'am.
Aye.
Great. New vice chair.
Congratulations.
I'm joking, Director Walls, I could abstain just for fun.
Moving on to item 8C, adopting our meeting schedule for 2025, 2026, and 2027.
Yes.
Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Just if I could give a brief background, I know the direction from the board at the last meeting was only for 2025 and 2026. I took the liberty of adding 2027 because of the timing of the GSP 5-year evaluation cycle. That will need to be approved by the board no later than in the January 2027 meeting. So I wanted to get that meeting on the calendar sooner rather than later. So apologies if that was not the direction asked. That's the background on why there's a third year there.
Well, the third year is not, you didn't overstep your boundaries of your authority, Dr. Weinberger.
And Ms. Supiger, could you scroll to that page of the board packet just so the public is aware of the scrolling down, I think still. Item, yeah, thank you.
So I will reserve the room 8 AM for all of those.
And we did receive a speaker card to speak on this item from the public.
So then before we vote on the schedule and no other comments from the board, if you could call our speaker, please.
Great. Mr. Davis did submit a request before the meeting to speak on this item. Mr. Davis, I will unmute you. And your 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you. The Brown Act entitles me to speak on each and every agenda item. However, I just have to say that I requested to speak on all of the items 8A, 8B, and 8C, and I'm only being allowed now to speak on 8C after 8A passed with no opportunity for public comment to criticize this agency. Therefore, I will move on to criticizing this agency for attempting to adopt a meeting schedule when it is admittedly not a legal entity. An illegal entity is incapable of adopting an agenda. This basically is another matter of this entity defrauding the public and claiming that it is a state local agency, which is an impossibility if it's not a legal entity. Therefore, it's incapable of adopting a meeting plan, because if you're doing so fraudulently and doing so with the intent, again, to defraud the public into believing that this is a legal entity capable of establishing a meeting schedule. And even if it did, it has shown today that it is not capable of complying with the Brown Act or the State Records Retention Act or the Public Records Act. Therefore, what needs to happen is this must be disbanded and reformed under a legal agreement to form a state local agency that is a legal entity capable of executing the laws of the state of California. I really would appreciate that, because I would prefer not to criticize the governance of this organization, but to participate in it in a meaningful way. I have a lot of information about groundwater and sustainability. However, it's impossible to deliver that to an illegal entity. So one of the questions I have is this to the members, and you should be able to answer this. Is this organization a legal entity or not? Or is it an illegal entity? The MOU says it's intended to be an illegal entity. That's the end of my comment.
Thank you.
And do we have a motion to adopt the schedule?
I'll move to adopt the meeting schedule.
Director Wang made the motion.
Second.
Director Gonzalez seconded. Any further discussion? Ms. Superger, will you please take the roll call vote?
Perfect. And sorry, that was Director Wang and Director Gonzalez. Correct. Perfect, thank you. Director Welsh,
Yes.
Director Singletary,
Yes.
Director Gonzalez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Wang,
Yes.
and Chair Natoli.
Aye.
Great, thank you. The meeting schedule is in effect.
Thank you very much. Now, are there any items that the board would like to have discussed at our next regular board meeting? Something that we've not directed already at the meeting today.
I would request agendizing the monitoring well for discussion for our seawater intrusion monitoring. Just to begin discussions on that, primarily on recommended location from our GSA consultant. So then we could begin discussing the location and timing for implementing that to comply with our GSP.
Very well, and Dr. Weinberger, is that enough information for the agenda?
It is, thank you.
Any other comments or questions? All right, hearing none, with that, the Santa Monica Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency, lawfully formed according to the state of California and the participating jurisdictions, is adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.